hear all the time about money, right? Like saving and investing and spending.
Yeah.
But honestly, how often do we really stop and think about like the psychology of it all?
Yeah.
The psychology behind our money decisions.
It's true. We often get so caught up in like the mechanics of it all, the numbers and the strategies,
Yeah.
without truly grasping those like underlying forces that shape how we actually behave with money.
Exactly. And that is one of the many things that I absolutely love about this book, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like your typical financial advice book.
Right.
It's more like a collection of stories and insights that honestly just make you completely rethink money.
It's really fascinating how it just like dives into these often totally irrational ways that our emotions and our biases and, just past experiences can influence our decisions about money.
Okay, so you've definitely got my attention. Like, give me an example. What kind of stories are we talking about here?
Well, one that really stuck with me was a story of Ronald Reed. He was a janitor, and he quietly amassed like an $8 million fortune.
A janitor with an $8 million fortune.
Yeah.
Okay, now there's got to be a good story there.
Oh, absolutely. So Reed lived a very humble life, drove a used Toyota, clipped coupons, and just generally flew under the radar.
Wow.
But through patience and frugality and consistent investing, he was able to build this incredible wealth.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
It really challenges that idea that you need to be like some financial genius or take crazy risks to actually be good with money.
Right. It's not about getting lucky or,
No.
it's just about being smart and steady.
Yeah, and being consistent, right? Like,
Exactly.
it's not just about knowing what to do,
Right.
but it's about actually doing it,
Yeah.
like over and over and over.
Yeah, consistently over time. And that's one of the core messages I think that the book is getting across. Simply knowing what you should be doing with your money just isn't enough. I mean, we all know, right, that we should be saving for retirement, avoid debt, and invest wisely. But our emotions and our behaviors, they often get in the way.
That's so true. Like,
Mhm.
I know I shouldn't be ordering takeout every night, but sometimes the temptation is just, it's too much.
Right. And the author, he compares this kind of like internal struggle to our understanding of our health. Like, think about it. We've made incredible strides in medicine, right?
Yeah.
We understand the importance of living a healthy lifestyle. But so many of us still struggle to actually implement those healthy habits.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with money. We know what we should be doing, but doing it.
Yeah.
That's the real challenge.
It's hard.
Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is that, like, our relationship with money, it's complex.
Mm-hmm.
And it's influenced by so many different things, not just our knowledge of, finances.
Absolutely. And that's where the book really shines, I think. It really digs into all of these psychological factors, but it uses these really interesting and compelling stories to do it, to illustrate all these points. Like, for example, he talks about how low-income households tend to spend a lot of money on lottery tickets,
Oh, yeah.
even though the odds of winning are incredibly slim.
Yeah, that's always been kind of a weird thing for me. It seems so counterintuitive, right?
Right.
Like, why would someone who can least afford to be spending money on that, why would they spend so much money on something that is so unlikely to pay off?
Yeah, it seems completely illogical, right? But Housel says it's not really about the logic, it's about hope. Like, for someone who has maybe always struggled financially, that lottery ticket, it represents a dream, right?
Yeah.
It's a chance to escape those circumstances.
Escape their situation.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's an example of how powerful emotions can be when it comes to money.
Right.
Yeah.
And, it shows how our personal experiences shape those financial decisions,
Right.
even if they don't seem rational, at first glance.
But he's kind of urging us to, like, look beyond just the surface.
Yeah.
Try to understand what's going on under the surface with people's decisions, right?
Absolutely.
Even if they don't seem rational to us.
And that understanding, can be really helpful for all of us in just navigating our own financial lives.
Right.
Once we realize just how big of a role our emotions play, we can start making more deliberate choices.
Yes, 100%.
Right.
Be more conscious.
Yeah.
Okay, so this book is already making me think differently about how I approach money. I like that. What else does he talk about?
So The book also goes into some, like, some key financial concepts,
Okay.
but it does it through this psychological lens, Like,
Okay.
for example, he talks about the power of compounding,
Okay.
which he compares to the formation of an ice age.
Compounding and ice ages. Okay, I'm going to need you to explain that one.
Okay, so it's actually a brilliant analogy. Just think about how, like, small, little, tiny changes in temperature over time can eventually lead to these massive ice sheets covering huge, vast areas.
Right.
Similarly, small, consistent investments over time can lead to enormous wealth, thanks to this principle of compounding.
So it's more about the long game than
Yeah.
like
Yes.
trying to time the market and hit a home run.
Yeah, it's about consistency and patience.
Yeah.
And he uses Warren Buffett as, like, the perfect example.
Okay.
Buffett's success isn't due to some, like, secret formula or risky bets.
Yeah.
It's really just about being a consistently good investor over a really long period of time.
I like it. It's simple,
Yeah.
but like powerful.
And you know what's crazy? Most of Buffett's wealth was actually accumulated after he turned 50.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's wild.
So that really highlights how patience can be more important than trying to be the smartest person in the room when it comes to investing.
Absolutely.
It's about letting time and that consistency
Exactly.
do the work for you.
Yeah. Let it do the heavy lifting.
I like that.
And to really kind of drive that point home, the author, he actually calculated that if Buffett had started investing later in life and retired earlier, his net worth today would be like a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of what it is. That's a really good point. And I think that's really encouraging, too, for people that are just starting out with investing.
Yes.
They don't need to be a genius.
Right.
They just need to start and then be consistent.
Yeah, just start early, be consistent, and let that compounding do its magic.
Okay, so we've got patience, consistency, anything else?
Yeah, well, it also gets into this idea of staying wealthy,
Okay.
which he says is actually harder than getting wealthy.
Really? Why is that? Why would that be harder?
Well, so he contrasts the stories of Jesse Livermore,
Okay.
who was like this wildly successful trader,
Yeah.
and Abraham Jermansky, who was a really wealthy real estate developer.
Well,
Both of these guys were amazing at making money, but they were both terrible at holding on to it.
so what happened?
They both made fortunes and then ended up losing it all. Livermore, he made a killing during the 1929 market crash, but then lost everything, and tragically he took his own life.
Wow.
Yeah,
So making money and keeping money, two very different skills.
two very different things.
Right.
And Hastow argues that staying wealthy requires a whole different mindset.
Right.
It's about frugality and being kind of paranoid about risk and really maintaining that long-term perspective.
Avoiding those urges to splurge, right?
Yeah.
Or chase the next big thing.
Exactly.
So would you say that even if someone isn't wealthy, that those principles still apply?
Absolutely. Those principles of staying wealthy are relevant no matter how much money you make,
Gotcha.
It's about living below your means,
Right.
being mindful of your spending and avoiding those tempting but ultimately harmful financial decisions.
Tempting in the moment, but yeah, long term,
Yes.
not a good idea.
Yeah.
So
Huh?
it's really easy to get caught up in that lifestyle inflation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Keeping up with the Joneses,
Oh, yeah.
but ultimately that can be really bad for your finances long term.
And I think that's why the book is so valuable,
Yeah.
It challenges these societal norms and makes us really think about what true wealth actually is.
Okay, so patience, consistency, staying wealthy, what else?
Oh, there's this great concept. You're going to love this one.
Okay.
So the idea is that wealth is what you don't see.
Okay, I'm very curious. Explain that one.
Okay, so true wealth is not about, like the fancy car you drive or the big house you own.
Right.
It's about the financial assets that you haven't converted into material things yet. It's about having choices,
Oh, I like that.
It's about freedom.
So it's not about the appearance of wealth. It's about like the actual freedom that wealth can give you.
Exactly. It's about having the ability to say no to things,
Okay.
to walk away from opportunities that don't fit your values, and to prioritize your time and your energy on the things that really matter to you.
I love that. So it's about having those choices, having that control, as opposed to feeling trapped by money.
Exactly. And that's one of the best things that money can buy. Freedom.
Yeah.
And control of your life.
Yeah, because true wealth isn't about comparing yourself to other people. It's about building a life that you want,
Yeah.
that reflects your values
Excellent.
and your priorities.
100%. And speaking of values and priorities, there's this other idea that I thought was really interesting,
Yeah.
which is that being reasonable is actually better than striving for perfect rationality.
Okay, when it comes to money decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. I'm listening.
So to illustrate this, he tells a story about a Nobel Prize winner, Julius Wagner Jauregg,
Okay.
who developed this very controversial treatment for syphilis
Oh, wow.
called malariotherapy.
Malariotherapy. That sounds intense. What is that?
So it involved intentionally infecting syphilis patients with malaria
Hold on.
to induce a high fever.
What?
Yeah, so the thinking was that this high fever could help fight the disease.
Intentionally giving someone malaria. That sounds incredibly risky.
It was super risky.
Yeah.
And, ultimately this earned him a Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
But it highlights that sometimes aiming for, perfect rationality
Right.
can lead to some really unintended consequences.
Unforeseen consequence.
And this applies to finance, too.
Okay, so what's the takeaway for us? Should we all be intentionally getting malaria to boost our finances?
Definitely not.
Okay, good.
But the point is that sometimes the best financial strategy isn't the one that looks perfect on paper,
Right.
but rather the one that you can actually stick with.
The one that works for you, right?
Yeah, even if it's not perfectly rational.
Yeah, so find that balance between, being informed, making good decisions, but also
Yeah,
doing it in the way that works for you and that you can sustain over time.
right. Especially with long-term investing.
Yeah.
It's all about finding that strategy you can maintain, even when the market is down.
It's about consistency, right? Like we've been talking about
It's
over and
yes.
over again, that theme of consistency.
Yeah, it's not about, finding the perfect or the most rational approach.
Gotcha. Okay, so that makes sense. It's about finding that path that you can stick with, not just the most, theoretically perfect one.
And that's a consistent theme throughout the book. It's not about giving super specific financial advice.
Right.
It's more about changing the way we think about money.
So understanding our own psychology and how that impacts our decisions, sometimes even more than the financial knowledge itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's packed with these thought-provoking ideas, these really insightful stories. Anyone who reads this book will have a much deeper understanding of themselves and their relationship with money.
So it's a must-read for anyone who really wants to improve their financial well-being, not just in terms of, their bank account, but also, their mindset, right? Their overall, relationship with money.
100%.
Okay, so we've covered a lot, but before we wrap up, I'm curious, is there anything else that really stood out to you?
Oh, absolutely. There's this other interesting point that he makes about how, well, we'll talk about that next time. So one we wanted to mention is that it seems like the book really challenges the typical ideas we hear about money and success.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not just about making the right moves. It's more about understanding ourselves, right? How our minds work.
Totally. And that actually leads perfectly into another point that Housel makes, which is that financial success, it's often more about avoiding mistakes
Yeah.
than it is about, making these brilliant moves.
Right. It's about resisting those urges, those shiny, tempting things that promise quick riches, but often lead to,
Yeah.
regret.
So instead of trying to hit a home run, it's more about playing good defense, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And avoiding those costly errors.
Yeah, it's about discipline, saying no to things,
Yeah.
staying focused on your goals, and just trusting the process.
Which can be hard, right? Especially in today's world,
Oh, absolutely.
where everyone's just talking about getting rich quick and overnight success.
It is tough, but that's why I think understanding the psychology behind our money decisions is so important.
Right.
We need to be aware of those biases, those emotional triggers that can lead us to making impulsive choices.
And those choices often aren't in our best interest.
Right. Exactly.
So it's about taking a step back and recognizing those patterns and developing strategies to kind of stay grounded
Yeah.
and focused on our goals.
Right. And another concept that really stood out to me was this idea that nothing's free.
When it comes to finances.
Yeah. Every financial decision has a cost.
Okay, I'm listening. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about market volatility.
Okay.
It's often seen as this negative thing,
Yeah.
something to be feared.
Avoided at all costs.
But the author argues that it's actually a feature, not a bug.
Okay.
It's the price of admission you pay for the potential for higher returns.
So rather than seeing volatility as this punishment, we
Mhm.
should see it more as the cost of playing the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Of investing.
If we see volatility as a fine, we're more likely to panic and make impulsive decisions.
Right.
But if we see it as a fee, it's easier to stay calm and disciplined.
I like that. That's a really interesting way to look at it.
It takes a lot of the fear and the anxiety out of it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Okay, so
Yeah.
we've talked about patience, consistency, staying wealthy, hidden costs.
Mm-hmm.
What else would you say is like a key takeaway from the psychology of money?
Well, one thing that I think is especially relevant today is that you'll change.
What do you mean?
Housel argues that, like, our goals and our desires, our risk tolerance, it's all going to change throughout our lives.
Right, like what we want in our 20s is probably going to be very different from what we want in our 40s or 60s.
Exactly. And yet we still often make long-term financial decisions based on our current situation.
Yeah.
And then we regret those decisions later.
So how do you navigate that? Should we just avoid making long-term plans completely?
Not necessarily. He's not saying to completely throw out long-term planning,
Okay.
but he does argue that it's super important to be flexible,
Okay.
to be adaptable. Like, you should have a long-term vision,
Right.
but also be willing to revisit your plans.
Make adjustments along the way.
Exactly.
So it's like having a roadmap, but being okay with taking a detour
Yes, perfect analogy.
if you need to, right?
Yeah.
It's about being intentional,
Mm-hmm.
but recognizing that things change.
Yeah, life is unpredictable.
Right.
Plans might need to change.
So it kind of takes the pressure off a little bit,
Exactly.
knowing that it's okay to adjust as you go.
Yeah, and, that kind of leads to another concept,
Okay.
the importance of room for error.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
So he argues that one of the biggest mistakes we can make is assuming that our financial plan is going to go exactly the way we picture it.
Well, yeah, because life rarely goes according to plan, right?
Exactly. There are always unexpected things that pop up,
Right. Curveballs.
whether it's losing your job, a health issue, or just,
Yeah.
priorities changing.
So we need to build in some wiggle room,
Yes,
to kind of absorb those unexpected events.
Exactly. He calls it having a margin of safety, like having an emergency fund,
Right.
diversifying your investments,
Yeah.
or just, not overextending yourself financially.
So creating a cushion.
Yeah, a safety net.
Those unexpected things that life throws your way.
Exactly.
And I imagine that can bring a lot of peace of mind
Oh, absolutely.
to know that you've got that safety net.
It lets you approach your financial decisions with more confidence,
Right.
more clarity, knowing that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
So it's not just about minimizing risk. It's about building resilience.
Yes.
And that adaptability into your financial life.
Exactly. And, one of the things I really appreciate about the book is how it challenges all of those get-rich-quick schemes
Yeah.
and really encourages this grounded and sustainable approach to building wealth.
Yeah, I think that's so important today
Yeah.
because everyone's talking about overnight success and all this stuff.
Right. It's everywhere.
But the reality is true financial freedom
Mm-hmm.
takes time and effort
Yes.
and consistent smart choices.
And the book really pushes back against that get-rich-quick mentality.
Yeah, I like that.
It reminds us that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It's about the long game.
Ah.
We're talking about that.
And it's those who are willing to play the long game that often see the best results.
So focusing on building good habits,
Yes,
making those smart choices, and trusting the process.
exactly. And realizing that real wealth is built slowly and steadily,
Right.
through consistent effort, smart choices, and a willingness to delay gratification.
Which can be so hard in today's world,
It is. It's really hard.
where everything's instant gratification.
Yeah, you want everything now, now, now.
Right, exactly.
But I think that message of patience and discipline is more important now than ever,
Yeah.
We need to be patient, be disciplined, and focus on building that solid foundation.
Rather than chasing those shiny objects that look really tempting,
Yes, exactly.
but don't really deliver.
They never deliver what they promise.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah,
This book sounds like a game changer.
it really is.
What else? What else stood out to you?
Well, one thing I really appreciated was how he explores financial history and how it can inform our decisions today.
Yeah, I love
Learning from the past.
I love history.
Yeah, me too.
I think it can help us avoid repeating the same
Yeah.
mistakes over and over.
Exactly. And that's one of the strengths of this book, I think.
Okay.
He looks at the history of bubbles, recessions, economic booms,
Yeah.
and he highlights the patterns and the lessons that we can learn from those events.
So it's not just about understanding financial concepts.
Right.
It's about understanding the context
Yeah, the historical time.
that those concepts are playing out in.
Exactly. And he points out that history can be a really good guide,
Mm-hmm.
but we also need to remember that the world is constantly changing.
Right.
And what happened in the past doesn't guarantee anything about what's going to happen in the future.
So it's about finding that balance
Yeah.
between learning from the past
Yeah.
and adapting to the present.
Exactly, because there's no crystal ball that can
Wow.
predict the future.
Unfortunately. Okay. And speaking of being adaptable,
Yeah.
something I really like is how the book encourages a sense of agency
Yes.
for our financial lives.
Over your own finances.
Because I think a lot of people just feel like they're at the mercy of the markets or the economy. But you're saying there are things we can control, right?
Absolutely. He argues that while we can't control everything that happens in the financial world,
Right.
we can control our own choices,
Okay.
our habits, and our behaviors.
So it's about focusing on what we can control and not worrying about those things that are out of our control.
Exactly.
And that's empowering.
It's incredibly empowering.
Because when we shift from fear to action
Mm-hmm.
and responsibility, that's when things can really change.
Yeah, you take ownership of your financial well-being. You
Yeah.
stop feeling like a victim.
Of circumstance.
Exactly.
That's such an important message, especially now when everything feels so negative
Yeah, it can be really easy to get caught up in all of that negativity.
and to feel helpless. Right.
Yeah, but this book reminds us that we do have choices.
Yeah, I love that.
It's one of my favorite things about it. It's not just about giving advice.
Yeah.
It's about empowering us to take control and create the future that we want.
To build a life that we desire.
Yes.
Okay.
And speaking of mindset, one of the most important things he talks about is the need to define success
Okay.
on our own terms, not by what society tells us
Yeah.
or by comparing ourselves to other people.
Yeah, it's so easy to fall into that comparison trap.
Oh, it's so easy.
Right, to always feel like you're not enough.
And that constant comparison
Yeah.
can really hurt your happiness and your financial well-being.
Totally.
He really encourages us to step back and think about what really matters to us. Like, what does success look like for you personally?
Yeah, what are your values? What are
Exactly.
your priorities?
And not letting society dictate those things for you.
I like that a lot.
It's about creating a life that is authentically yours.
Yes, one that aligns with your values and your vision for your life.
100%.
Okay, so this book is sounding less like a financial guide and more like
I know, right?
this philosophical exploration of how money impacts our lives.
Yeah, it really is.
Our values, our identity, our vision for the future.
Exactly. That's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, and that's what I think makes for a really good book, right?
Yeah.
It's about more than just the numbers.
And it's not just dry, boring financial theory, you know?
Right.
It's a collection of really engaging stories.
That make you think.
Yeah, it's a page turner. You won't be able to put it down.
Okay, well, you've convinced me. I'm putting this book on my reading list.
Good. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about it before we move on?
Yeah, one last thing I wanted to mention is how he does such a good job of like weaving together personal anecdotes,
Mm-hmm.
historical examples,
Okay.
and research to make his points.
So it's not just like a textbook, right?
No, not at all.
It's more conversational.
Yeah, and it's entertaining too.
That's what makes a good book, when you can learn something without feeling like you're back in school.
I completely agree.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I'd love to get your final thoughts.
Okay.
If you could sum up the key message of this book in just like a sentence or two, what would it be?
That's a great question. I think the key message of The Psychology of Money is that financial success isn't about being a genius or having some secret formula. It's about understanding yourself, your biases, your emotions, and developing a mindset and habits that allow you to make smart choices consistently over time.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
It's about taking control of your financial life, aligning your money with your values, and creating a life that's both financially secure and personally fulfilling.
Exactly.
And I think that's a message that can benefit anyone, no matter how much money they make or what their financial goals are.
Absolutely everyone can benefit from this book.
Okay, well, I couldn't agree more. It's amazing how much our emotions play into our finances.
It really is.
It's not just about the numbers, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's about understanding ourselves and how we think about money.
Yeah, and this kind of ties into something else that I found really fascinating from the book.
Okay.
This idea that money's often more about stories than it is about numbers.
Okay. How can money be about stories?
Well, he argues that, like, how we think about money is really influenced by the narratives we kind of create,
Okay.
like the stories we tell ourselves and others about wealth and success and, failure, too.
Yeah, so like our perceptions of money are often shaped by like cultural norms,
Exactly.
personal experiences, right?
Yeah.
Even fictional accounts, all these things.
Right. We grow up hearing stories about money, whether it's from our family or friends or the things we see on TV and in the news, right?
Yeah.
And those stories shape how we think and what we do with our money.
Yeah, for sure. Like if you grow up hearing that rich people are all greedy or that money is evil,
You're right.
then you're going to have a different relationship with money than someone who hears stories about like abundance,
Right, exactly.
right, and generosity.
And those beliefs, they can become self-fulfilling prophecies, you know?
Right. If you believe that money is scarce,
Yeah.
that you'll never be wealthy,
Yeah.
you're less likely to make choices that would lead to financial success.
Right, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure from the beginning.
Yeah, so it's about being aware of those stories
Hmm.
and examining them and challenging those stories that aren't serving you.
Exactly. He encourages us to really be critical of all the money narratives we hear, you know? Challenge the status quo and create our own stories that help us make good choices.
So we can create new stories that support our goals.
Yeah, that align with what we want.
Okay, so it's about taking control of those stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And that can help us shape our financial destinies.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Okay, and this kind of leads to another point
Yeah.
that Housel makes, which is that
Mm-hmm.
personal finance is deeply personal.
It is. It really is.
And there's no like one-size-fits-all
Yeah.
approach to money.
Everybody's different.
Right, because everyone's situation's different, everyone's values
Yeah.
and goals are different.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think we so often try to just apply this like general financial advice without thinking about our own situation.
It's a mistake a lot of people make.
Yeah.
But he really emphasizes that what works for one person
Right.
might not work for someone else.
And I think that's a big part of why people get frustrated, right?
Yeah.
With managing their money.
And, it doesn't have to be that way. We all need to find a financial strategy that works for us.
Right. So it's about taking ownership,
Yeah.
being proactive, finding a path that feels good to you,
Exactly. It's about being the architect of your own financial plan.
rather than just blindly following what everyone else is doing.
Right. That's when it becomes really liberating.
Yeah.
When you create a financial life that reflects your values.
Okay. So we've covered so much in this deep dive.
Yeah, well, yeah.
This book really does sound like a must read for anyone who wants to improve their relationship with money.
It is.
Not just the numbers, but like you've been saying over and over.
Your mindset and your overall well-being.
Yeah, it can really change how you think about money.
Right. So we keep coming back to this idea
Yeah.
that financial success isn't about being a genius.
Right.
Right. It's not about having some secret formula.
It's about being smart about your choices.
Yeah, it's about understanding yourself.
Yes.
Your biases, your emotions.
Developing those good habits.
Right, and making smart choices consistently.
Consistently over time.
And it's about having the courage to define success based on what matters to you,
Yeah,
not based on what other people think or what society tells us.
exactly. It's about creating a life that's financially secure and personally fulfilling.
Okay, well said.
Yeah.
I think that's the perfect place to end.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive into the psychology of money.
It's been a pleasure. I always love talking about this stuff.
Me too. And to our listeners, thank you for joining